Agencies Drinking Beer is brought to you by Proposify, software that helps you deliver beautiful proposals in the cloud and close more deals.
Welcome to the 41st episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. On today's show, we're going to be talking with Shrad Rao, who is the CEO of Wagepoint, automated payroll for small businesses, and he's going to be talking to us about building his awesome company, Wagepoint. We had a lot of fun earlier this week getting our picture taken.
How about we go before that and talk about the thing that happened Friday afternoon?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you tell the listeners about that?
Well, at exactly 3:12, there was a false alarm. Kyle cheated us, and then we finally really did have our customer that did create our 1 million ARR.
Yes, I thought I was doing a good thing. Okay, so people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. We just on Friday, we hit our first $1 million of annual recurring revenue, or ARR. So that doesn't mean there's $1 million in our bank account for those, unfamiliar with SaaS metrics. But basically, that just means that if we didn't lose a customer and we didn't gain a customer in 1 year's time, we would have we would have done $1 million in business. So we have that as recurring
revenue.
benchmark,
in this industry.
Yeah, it's a great benchmark.
So we proceeded to have a good time that night. Friday night was a great night, taking out the team and indulging.
Yeah. Not everybody could come out, but those who did, we had a good time, and many drinks were had.
Yes.
Yeah, and you don't usually get out and get your drank on.
I don't.
So it was nice to see that.
Yeah, it was fun. Had a great time. Yeah.
So quite a milestone, but we can't rest on our laurels just yet.
No, sir.
We got to keep it going. And so Monday, we had our pictures taken. We set that up. We just wanted to get some nice professional shots of Kevin and I, and individual shots to
romance shots.
Use for different PR things or whatever. Kevin loves getting his picture taken.
It's my favorite. Just like heights. I like heights too.
Yeah. You really don't like to smile.
Well, the lead press-on smile doesn't work for me.
It's so funny, and we got the link to the photos yesterday or the day before, and I've just been going through them like laughing my ass off. Because should we show the listeners some of the outtakes or
no?
So the trick.
Why would we?
The trick to getting a natural smile out of Kevin was he would do his fake press-on smile, his like deer in the headlights kind of smile, and then I would laugh my ass off, and then Kevin would laugh at me laughing, and then Michelle would take the photo. So we got some really nice...
Worked really well.
Got some really nice smiles out of you. Yeah. What did you think of the pics that I chose?
Good. For the most part. There's 3 that I like out of all of them. I think, but good. You did a good job.
Excellent.
You must be a designer.
Maybe I am. Yeah. Anyway, thought you guys would be interested in that. I don't really have anything to talk about this week other than our... going into our awesome interview. So why don't we do our interview with Shrad Rao! I'd like to welcome Shrad Rao to the podcast, and Shrad is the CEO of Wagepoint. Wagepoint is payroll automation for small businesses, and we are customers as well. So very excited to have Shrad on the show. Welcome.
Hey, Kevin, how you guys doing? And Kyle.
We're doing pretty good, I think.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself.
No, I'm doing great too.
Good.
Feeling good. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We love your application.
Yeah, we're actually fanboys. We've been customers for quite a long time of Wagepoint, and so getting to meet the founder is pretty cool.
Those are my favorite words any morning. So thank you so much. I got to say, I have the same sort of feeling when I saw you guys come out with Proposify. I looked at you had such amazing design aesthetic, and honestly, you guys were one of those people that I said, oh, these people really know what they're doing. When I looked at just the way that you communicated with your target audience and stuff like that. So believe me, the respect and the feeling of admiration is mutual.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to us. So,
yes.
But let's talk about you. So you've been on some other podcasts before, and you've done a lot of online interviews, and you've kind of talked about how how Wagepoint I guess evolved. But for our listeners who may not have heard that, maybe just give us a brief synopsis of sort of how did you come up with the idea for Wagepoint and get it off the ground and start getting customers? I suppose that's a lot of questions. First of all, how did you come up with the idea for Wagepoint?
Well, so I mean, the short version of the story is that it all started with the search for a business partner. See, the thing is, the kind of person that I am, I'm more interested in problem solving than the business itself, in a way, or the product itself. So really, for me, it didn't really matter which, what product I was trying to build and expand into a business, as long as I could. I guess what I'm saying is the value of or the exchange of value for money in a business environment is more interesting to me than the product itself. So as far as Wagepoint is concerned, I was looking for a business partner that I could build a business with. And it didn't matter to me which business it was, as I just mentioned. People sometimes joke with me and ask me, like, hey, if we gave you like a sewage business, would you get into the sewage business? And I say, you know what? I would probably get into the sewage business, because as long as you as long as you give me one sewage company and help me get into, and tell me, let's expand it into 10, that's what I'm really interested in. I'm actually interested in the business itself. The short version is that I started looking for a business partner, and through that process, I met a guy by the name of Bill Murphy in your neck of the woods, Halifax, which is where I was living at the time. And what ended up happening is he said, look, there's this whole space in payroll and HR technology, and it looks like it's being underserved, especially in Canada, but potentially overseas as well, like in the U.S. and other markets. And he said, would you be interested in helping me discover this? And I said, heck yeah, like, why not? And then one of the things he made me do is take a look at the existing software that people were using to pay, like he was using to pay employees at the time. And that's sort of when it clicked for me. I was like, whoa, this stuff is terrible. And I was like, well, if we could do some very basic, even some basic changes would make massive, improvements in the space. And so that's how we got started in the spaces. He showed me an example of how bad it was. And then I said, well, this definitely looks like a problem that needs to be solved.
Interesting. I remember a few years ago when we had our first business together, Headspace, we were using probably the big boys, the big competitor ADP. And I don't think either of us were ever very impressed with it from multiple standpoints. The product, the
I remember thinking there's got to be a better way, and there wasn't at the time.
Yeah, they were kind of like the big monolith. It seemed like we didn't have a choice. There was no other choices in the marketplace. And then I can't remember how we stumbled upon Wagepoint. I think you found it, or our
it was actually
did.
I think it was KLM Financial. I think it was Kelly Johnston.
Yeah, so our finance people found it, and admittedly, I don't use it a lot because I really just check out my pay stubs. But because I don't do the finances, it's more Kevin and our finance partner Kelly. But just looking at what you guys do and how you put it all into one, you do like payroll calculations and year-end T4s, and every employee gets a link to view their pay stub and view their download their T4s, and it's just so easy. And it does kind of feel like, why didn't anybody do this before? So you put it into this very slick, easy to use, simple package, and I mean, there's no wonder that you guys are killing it. So kudos.
Well, thank you. The interesting part about all the things that you just said is that it's sort of like the expression of a duck floating over water but paddling furiously underneath. See, the thing is, to build something like payroll software is very, very difficult. And it's difficult for many reasons. Like in your business, I'm assuming that you have a product, which is a Proposify, and then you have your customer service, which is, basically responding to tickets and phone calls or whatever, maintenance questions people have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. In our business, we have both those elements. So we have our product, we have a customer service team, and then we have a whole bunch of operations to manage the millions of dollars that we have to keep track of every single day for our customers, right? So there's an additional layer of complexity because you're dealing with money, right? And if you think about what that does is that actually creates, it actually creates layers of regulation and bureaucracy in a small company that you have to build very fast because you can't live without it very fast into your life. So I guess my point is that even though we've taken a couple of years to get to this point where we are in the U.S. and Canada, and we have both of our operations teams and our CS teams fully fleshed out, it's only this year that we've actually got every piece of the puzzle to actually accelerate our growth. And so this is like basically 2.5 years later from when we started. That's how complex it has been to get to this point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can imagine. And so when I say, like, it's amazing nobody's done this before, and I don't mean to make that sound like it's easy or anybody could do this in their sleep. Obviously, there's a lot of technical and probably legal complexity behind it, especially when you're dealing with people's money. I mean, we face it to a certain degree because people send proposals and you're kind of dealing with, like, people's livelihood to some degree. People are they have to rely on it for their clients to sign off to win deals. But I mean, we're dealing with the promise of money. You're literally dealing with their money. You're pulling it out of their bank account and giving it. Sending it.
I'd hate to be paying your error and admissions insurance policy.
Well, you know what? We've had to pay one fine so far in the on behalf of our customers, because the kind of company that we are is we've always been okay with admitting mistakes. Like, if you've made a mistake, we'll admit it, and that's sort of baked into our culture. And we've had to pay one fine so far, and it was a mistake. This was like 2 years ago, and it was a very large payroll. So the mistake is the fine is as big as the payroll is usually proportionate to it. And I think it was our software didn't turn on accelerated remittance, which most companies in Canada don't have accelerated remittance. They have like non-accelerated, like basically once a month we send all of their funds to the government. But accelerated is pretty much once every week. And just for some reason there was a bug in the software and it didn't catch when someone saved the accelerated. They just switched the radio button to accelerated and it didn't save. That's all that happened. In the scheme of bugs, it's a small bug. But the consequence of that bug was we had to pay $8,000 in fines. And that's for like 1 month of non-payment because we didn't pay it. You see what I mean? So the consequences are so massive that we cannot not get it right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can imagine the pressure that must be. I want to go back to something that you said earlier. So if I guess if I understood you correctly, and I think I identify with it to some degree, you're saying that you didn't start Wagepoint and start growing it for the last 4 years because you were, passionate about payroll, like you just dreamt about doing people's, payroll taxes, calculations, and that kind of thing. It was something where there was a clear need in the marketplace. You had, a business partner who identified that need, and you were interested in the idea of how do we solve this and how do we create a business out of it. And I think I can identify that to some degree because, like, Kevin and I don't, believe it or not, contrary to what most people think, we don't actually dream about proposals all night.
Quite the opposite back in the day. I used to hate them.
I think some of the best businesses are ones where it's not that the founders are necessarily, love the product itself. That what you love is the problem that it solves. Because most people hate dealing with payroll stuff. Most people hate dealing with proposals, and our products make that easier for them. And that's something more that we can get excited about and wake up every day and be passionate about.
Yeah, totally. I mean, solving the pain for somebody else, making someone happy as a result is actually more fulfilling than, being able to send money to the government because really they don't really need any more. But no, not just that. It's the simple idea of being the person that is solving that problem for that person. It's awesome, right? It's like that's gratification for you. So yeah, I think that I think that you have a lot of influencers in business that say things like don't build a business until you're madly passionate about it. But the truth is you can be passionate about business itself, and the product can be swapped out as long as you're solving a problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so from what I understand, you're not a coder. You have more kind of like a UX background, or you did, I believe, from what I've read and heard, the original kind of design for Wagepoint or the wireframing. So, I guess what was the process like of taking this idea of how do we simplify payroll automation, and how did you actually turn that into a minimal viable product and start getting customers with it?
Well, so the thing is, before Bill and I worked on Wagepoint, he had another project because, Bill usually does. And he was working on this company called Art on Earth, which we then renamed Sociability. And it was a social network for persons with disabilities. That's basically what it was. And he, at that time when I was working with him, that's when I really I cut my teeth on building products. And because I can't code, I have to be able to translate my vision in a way that is going to make sense for the coder, right? And so there's no better way, in my opinion, than to start building wireframes. And that's really where I started. So I remember downloading Balsamiq, like in 2010 or something like that. And I started to design it as to what obviously I researched, I logged into many competitor sites. It scared me. And then I decided to just forget about all of those things and just start as if I was a brand new person running payroll. What would I need to do? And that's kind of how we got started. So even though I did do the UX part and the UI part, the reality is that in our business, because it was so complicated, we figured that it's best to build the most simplistic front end and then work on upgrading it after we had finished building the rest of the business, all the logic, all the operations, everything else. So even though I'm happy with the way it turned out because we do have thousands of people using it. At the same time, how there's always like a feeling that you could do better. That's what I go through every day.
I think we all feel that. I was actually at a startup event last night, and I remember people saying that. I think that's a common feeling, SaaS founders, well, probably founders of anything in particular, but when you have a product, especially a digital one, it's like people might tell you, well, it looks great, but then you're always like, oh, but I can imagine how much better it could look. It's just never ending. It
really is. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, we actually got Kevin and I got our pictures taken earlier this week, and the photographer kind of knows us and knows a little bit about our history, and she's like, she couldn't wrap her head around the fact that we still need to hire people and still have to employ developers and designers. She's like, but the product's finished, isn't it? Like, you have customers, it's done.
Yeah, I know. Bill used to ask me all the time, what does Facebook need 3,000 engineers for? And I'm like, I don't even know where to start to explain this to you, So I totally understand.
Yeah. There's something that because I'm a weird, creepy stalker, there's something that I read about something that you talked about in another interview for Founders Grid that kind of caught my eye, because especially where a lot of people listening to this podcast are marketing agency owners, and they kind of thrive on the fact that they need clients that can't do marketing themselves and they need to outsource it to them. There was something where you talked about some of the mistakes that you made early on with Wagepoint, and you said that one of them was essentially outsourcing marketing and not learning it for yourself. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love for your audience to sort of understand the perspective of, an entrepreneur like myself who would be the person buying their services. So I'm happy to share those experiences. Ultimately, the bottom line is that we know our products, right? We know our customer. And it's very hard very early in a relationship, like with a marketing agency, to know whether they're going to do a good job or not. Because all you've got is stuff they've done in the past with other people, right, who are not at all in your space necessarily. Or you've got, their promises, right? And so it's really qualifying a marketing agency as to whether or not they should work on your business is extremely difficult. I'm not sure what the resolution is, because again, the way we solved it was by bringing in a house and basically expanding our team in house. But I would say the single biggest problem is that there are very few people that we've talked to that have truly understood our business and understood how to target our market and been able to come up with a plan. I would say we've lost at least minimum of 50,000 Canadian dollars in the exercise of marketing firms.
That's a lot of money.
So I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not sure I know the answer for it, but to qualify a marketing agency, like, some of the questions people ask are very telling, right? But initially, we didn't understand that. Like, they would come up with, like, some people would never even ask us what our avatar was, like, our target market. Like, I mean, think about that, right? Like,
wow.
Do you have a persona for your customer? What do they look like? Can I meet someone? Can I talk to one of your customers? Any of those things. And as I've grown up, I've understood that they have to ask those questions, or they're probably never going to be the right fit. And it's not that we don't outsource marketing today. It's just that what we do, what we've learned is we take the entire dynamic of marketing, right? So starting from content creation, awareness building, all that other fun stuff, and now we've taken pieces of it and outsourced it to specialized agencies, as opposed to giving the whole thing up to somebody. Do you follow me?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we do, a similar thing as well. So,
So for example, our technical SEO, we're just not going to have the time to go and update every post and check it against SERP results, et cetera, et cetera. So that we've outsourced that piece. So we pump out the content, but then the technical SEO bit is done by an agency who specializes in that, and we have very good metrics to track progress. That's versus before we'd say, hey, can you help us build up, can you tell us what strategy should we take to make this happen? Now we define the strategy and we make more tactical outsourcing decisions.
Which is funny because it's what a lot of agencies actually hate, the technical stuff, or they hate sort of fulfilling orders. They like to kind of be part of the business. Part of the strategy.
They also wanted to probably build you a Wagepoint billboard for the highway. That was probably their strategy and plan.
Well, that's part of it, and the other part of it too is that they like to tell us what to do, even though we're in the space and we live it, and that's just, and that's unfortunate because the thing is that the whole thing is a dance, right? It's a careful tango that we're all doing with each other, like with us in a marketing agency, and the idea is that they have to take all the information that they need in order to be able to give us something useful, but because they don't ask the right questions and they don't live in the moment with us, with the customers, etc., that's where it all goes off the rails. So I would say that any company needs to know themselves first. It's sort of like know yourself, and then you will be able to tell whether or not which pieces you should outsource.
One of the common, I guess, pieces of advice that Kevin and I have given on this podcast for the last year that people are probably sick of us saying, but I think it rings true with what you're saying, is the need for agencies to specialize. And I think the more specialized, the more not only effective they'll be, but the more they'll be able to help, say, a company like Wagepoint. Because if you're a company that says we do digital marketing for anybody who will hire us, you're going to get the worst leads. You're not going to be able to stand out in your market. You're not going to really be able to work on things that are outside of your geographic area. But if you say we're the best technical SEO for startups or for finance companies or whatever, then as long as that market's big enough, you're going to have all the clients you need because you're the best in what you do. And not enough agencies specialize.
I could not agree with you more. If you remember companies like Digital Aptitude and, sort of companies that are agencies that have literally said, okay, we are UX, UI geniuses, or even Meta Labs for that matter, right? Yeah. They're just so known for that one thing or two things that they do that you feel like giving them your business. But you're 100% right. Like trying to be everything to everyone, especially in that space, is detrimental. It's usually detrimental in most businesses, right? But especially in service businesses, you really need to know what your strength is and just play to that.
Yeah. I think the other takeaway, too, from your experience working with marketing agencies is that it's very important for every company, big or small, to have some kind of internal marketing understanding. Even just one person on the team. You can have 10 coders on your team, but there should be one person there who is very experienced with marketing, knows it inside and out, and can at least work with the agencies. They don't have to necessarily do everything. They don't have to do that technical SEO or run that AdWords campaign, but they, you need to have some kind of internal understanding. You can't just outsource it like you'd outsource, your payroll, for example.
Well, it's also about accountability. It's accountability too. You can keep them accountable if you kind of know even high level every aspect of it.
I mean, the thing is, like in any entrepreneurship journey, right, you can only pick a few things to study, right? So you could say, okay, I'm going to, in this process, I'm going to hone my marketing skills or my product skills, or I want to start coding from scratch and I want to go to boot camp and learn how to do that. There's only so much time, right? So you sort of have to pick your poison. And in our case, we've had really good, our engineering team is really solid, and they really don't need, they don't need a bad coder to come in and ruin their life, right? By starting to learn to code at that point. And I've always been a customer backwards guy. Like I always think about what is the customer going to need, and then I figure out how to get it to them from that point. And so I love marketing. I love everything about it. I love positioning. I love thinking about how to tell a story. I love all of those things. And I think that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to come at your business. You have to get good at that stuff, right? Because you're talking to many people, like you're talking to investors, you're talking to customers, you're talking to employees, and all of them, you're telling a story about your business. And essentially, that's what marketing is, right? So I totally agree with you. You don't have to be 100%. You don't have to know how SEO works necessarily, but you sure as heck need to know that that's important or something like that is important. And you're not going to get that unless you're out there and you're reading and you're researching and you're talking to people and listening to podcasts like this.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you're quite the hybrid of product and marketing guy. And I know that those skills are, essential when you're building a SaaS product, especially early on when you just don't have, it's before you've raised money or you don't have the budget to hire a marketing team or a product team. It's really just kind of you and maybe an engineer and another founder. Like that's an essential skill set. And it sounds like you've got that wide range of skills and you can adapt.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like most entrepreneurs. I'm sure both of you guys are very similar, where you can pretty much, you find the spot that needs your help the most, and you'll figure out how to make it work in that spot, right? So if you need to be the best hiring manager that you can be, then that's what you're going to do, right? Aside from very hard technical skills, like I said, which is coding, I think I've participated in every aspect of the business, right, from customer service to operations to, product development. But yeah, I would say my core strength is definitely product and marketing. And the other thing, so you just mentioned something really interesting for me, because the thing is that you can build a product, right? Like people build products all the time, but to be able to weave a story into that product, now that's marketing, right? So for example, what we're working towards next is, we're calling it Wagepoint 2.0 because we're not very creative about names. And essentially what it is, we're incorporating marketing elements into our app. And I'm not saying it's marketing to get more customers always, but it's also marketing to tell a better story of the journey for the user. So for example, now when you sign up, next you're going to be able to get a link that you're going to get right in the sign up page. It'll be like, hey, I'm Troy Lutz, who you guys probably know. I'm here to help you. Here's a Calendly link in case you need to contact me for a demo or if you have any questions during the setup process. So it's basically, we know that customers have questions in the process, and instead of sending them an email, we'll just find a way to put it into the app itself so that they can find it anytime that they need it, which is when when they need it the most, which is when they're in the app, as opposed to go looking in an email, etc. So those are the types of marketing hacks that we'll figure out, and we're figuring out as we are working on Wagepoint 2.0.
That's awesome. Can't wait for you to roll that out. Do you have a timeline, which I know is a question you don't want me to ask?
Yeah, the timeline hurts me for two reasons. One, because we're always wrong, and two, because I always want it faster than people can give it to me. Yeah. So we're targeting a summer release. That's what we're hoping for, because again, there's so many moving parts in the product that we have to make sure that we don't make it worse than it was before.
Yeah.
Because that's a real fear, right?
And that happens a lot. I mean, I remember this is kind of a bit of an obscure reference, but I know some people will know what I'm talking about, which is the WYSIWYG editor Redactor, which is used in a lot of products. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Redactor? They had an awesome. It was like the best. It was better than CK Editor or Tiny MC, whatever. Like it was the best. And then they just launched the new one, and everything broke, and like you can't paste in it anymore. It just completely fucks you up your markup, and it's like that's a big concern when you build software. Is like you think about all the ways that it could be better, and then you kind of roll out this like let's just redesign it from the ground up, recode a lot of it, and then there's that risk that it's gonna be worse than before.
I totally. I mean, and you know, the other thing is sometimes when you have more information, you know, you're basically like, now I know, you know, this is one place where the customer gets trips up. This is another place. And now you're trying to solve all the problems at the same time. In a way, you kind of make it more complex and you open yourself up to that risk more. When the product is simpler and people are messing up, in a way, at least you're still able to satisfy a majority of the users on the system, right? Because they're all using a simplistic version of it, and there are places where they get kind of messed up. But when you try to solve everybody's problem, you're literally putting yourself in a position where you may solve nobody's problem. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, a very scary proposition. And in fact, to be very honest, the day that we go live, like, you know, there's going to be some handshaking, you know, and some hair falling, just because it's going to be scary for some people, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking of product and solving problems, I know one of the, I think one of the most elusive things, especially for a lot of startup founders, quick aside, I noticed in your LinkedIn profile that you were a mentor at, was it Launch 36?
Yeah.
Propel ICT.
Yeah, that's what it used to be called, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Propel ICT. So for those not in the know, and this is kind of a weird Canadian maritime connection, but you were in New Brunswick, which is very close to where we are in Nova Scotia, just a few hours drive away. And Propel ICT is kind of like a startup, somewhat, what would you say, a startup accelerator?
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate, yeah.
Yeah. So my point in bringing that up is that you've talked to a lot of startup founders. You did then, and I'm sure you probably talk to a lot now of people that are in the early stage. And we are in kind of like a startup network, I guess, here in Volta. So we talk to a lot of startup founders. And probably the thing that that's the most elusive for them all is this idea of product market fit. Because a lot of them have an idea or they're working on an MVP, but very few people get to that point where they really start to scale. They've hit product market fit, and now it's a whole other set of challenges. Obviously, you and Wagepoint are well past that stage. So I'd love to kind of hear from your standpoint. Of course, we've got our own story, but I'd love to hear your story about what were the days like pre-product market fit for you, and what do you think were some of the decisions that you made with the product that really got you to that PM fit stage?
Well, so I mean that's a really great question, actually. I mean, I think it's like that's basically the holy grail, right? Like you rightfully said. At first, that's all you care about is, can I get enough customers to find value in what I've built? And then can I get enough of them to pay me for that? Right? Those are the only two questions you have to ask initially. So the way that we did it was so obviously now we have software and all that other stuff, and that's great. But when we started out, we just had the idea, right? And so we needed to validate and test it. And at this point, like, you know, the whole Eric Ries lean startup thing had just started. But to be frank, I hadn't really read it at that time. I just thought instinctively that we need to test it on a smaller bunch of people before we sort of go big and, you know, or go home kind of thing. So what we did is we threw up a landing page. It was just a website that said, you know, like payroll services. We offer payroll services, and I put Bill's face on it because Bill's older than I am, and I felt like he would give it the necessary credibility, considering he's also a chartered accountant, and he looks a little bit more serious than I am, and I'm definitely dorkier than he is. So I decided that.
You had a face you could trust.
Sorry?
You had a face you could trust.
Yes, exactly. And you know, I always look like I'm up to no good, right? So it's better for everybody if it's him than me. So So I put its face up there. I put it like, we had one person working with us, and that's Amanda. And Amanda was essentially going to take any customers that we got from this landing page and then run payroll for them manually, like physically go into Great Plains is what we were using, spin up a Great Plains account for this customer, and ignore the rest of the ERP that is Great Plains and only focus on the payroll part of it, and just start to physically, like, manually do Mechanical Turk and enter the information, run payroll, and then email them all the reports that they needed. So that's basically, and this time we already had like a deal with RBC to move the money. So we figured out some portions of it, but not the entire shebang, so to speak. So what ended up happening is, on that landing page, on that website, we wrote a lot of copy. Now in hindsight, that website is kind of embarrassing how bad it was. But we just needed to put something up and start getting some signups. And this is happening obviously while we're building the product on the site, right? So what we did is, on the second page of the website, we put a little box that said, if you're interested in the next step, basically, we'll give you a sneak peek of the forms. Just sign up here. And, you would think that nobody in their right mind would be interested in getting a sneak peek of forms, but that form got used about 300 times in about a year's time. So we had about 300 leads, basically, that we collected, that we, now obviously 300 sounds small because, sometimes you get that in a month. But at that time, it was
early on, it's very big.
Yeah, at that time I was like, whoa, I can't believe that just a website about payroll services is getting a lot of hits. So so what I did is I called every single one of those customers or those prospective customers. We ended up getting about 50, I think, of those that converted and became like these Mechanical Turk customers of ours. But the thing is, we talked to every single one of them and we found out what was needed for this to be successful. And interestingly enough, the number one problem with payroll is actually never the software. Even though the software helps, like when it's good and it works and all that other stuff, the number one problem with payroll is actually service. So what happens is, if you're working with like ADP, and if you are uncomfortable to call them when you have a problem, because maybe it's going to take too long, maybe you're not sure if you're going to get the right answer, maybe you're fed up of telling the same thing twice, the second or third time to a new person, whatever the reason. If you decide to make a decision, or if you make a decision on your own and it's wrong, everybody suffers. Like you suffer as a customer, we suffer as someone trying to help you fix it, and then sometimes there's fees to pay and all that other stuff. So it's never a pleasant experience when you put yourself in that position, or when you are put in that position, I should say. So what we realized is that what we needed to do was build a very strong customer service team, because what we really want is for people to be to find us as approachable and as accessible as possible. So.
That really carries through quite a bit in your marketing, I have to say.
After dealing with ADP for so many years, that's huge, because that's one of their main problems.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
We had issues with, back in the Headspace days, remember, when there were certain times where we just, didn't have enough money to, we were worried about making payroll. We were like, literally, Kevin was driving a couple hours to a client's door to like pick up a check so we could make payroll. There were really hairy times during that time.
And they weren't flexible. There was no flexibility. They were so rigid.
They didn't seem to empathize with our...
No customer service. Yeah. No customer happiness, I should say.
It seems like from, Wagepoint, I mean, thankfully we haven't been in that position for a long time, but you guys do a really good job of making Wagepoint seem very approachable and friendly, even just in your design and your marketing.
Well, and it's totally, and that whole approach, first of all, that's who I am, to be very honest, in the first place. Right, so that it just happened to work out that we could make a friendly payroll company, but the other thing is that whole insight about what we should focus on came from all of those dialogues and that discussion. So my point is, product market fit isn't always about product and features. It can actually be about purely what do I tell my target market so that they are going to be the most moved, into action. Basically, what can I do? What can I tell you that will resonate the most with you? And that whole aspect came from the discussions we had. And so product market fit for us was first talking to these early customers, building our product on the side, and really thinking about how to position ourselves against competitors, because we realized that even if we just differentiated on service, and we had an okay product but amazing service, that alone would be enough to take us to the next level. And so that's what I'm saying, like, to all the listeners out there who are building products, and really think about some emotional aspects to the sale that you can also incorporate in there, because I think all of those things are important when you're ready to go to market.
Yeah, that's great advice, and yeah, I completely agree with that. Shrad, I'm afraid we're out of time, but I wanted to really thank you for taking the time to be on the show today.
Hey, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. I think this is a great podcast, and you asked some really good questions, so this was really fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
There was a lot to chat about. I think maybe down the line we could have a version 2 of this chat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always up for drinking beer. Maybe next time we'll schedule it at a time that I won't feel, it's not 10 o'clock in the morning. I won't feel like the cheesehead for drinking beer at 10.
You're not supposed to give away the secret that we don't always drink beer on the show.
It is St. Patty's Day, though, so I do see beers in our future today.
We have no choice. Like, the power of Irish people compel us, so we have to drink beer now.
The power of Irish compel us. On that note, we will end the interview, and hope the listeners enjoyed that. Excellent.
That was a great... No, I tell you, I love their service. I love everything they do. What a guy.
Shrad's a great guy.
He's a feel-good guy, too.
He's a feel-good guy. He's very complimentary.
He's positive.
Yeah, and he actually stayed on after we stopped recording. He, asked us a lot of questions about our business and gave us some advice, and just, seems really just willing to help. So he's a good guy. And
if you're looking for a payroll service, you should check them out.
Who else would you use, right?
I know. We've used others and in our agency, and no one can top what these guys do.
Are people in the U.S. able to use Wagepoint,
Oh, yeah.
do you know?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought he told us something about breaking into the U.S. market.
No, they're in there now.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah.
So for a lot of our listeners who are U.S.-based, which I think most probably are, definitely check out Wagepoint especially if you're just looking for a very easy all-in-one solution for payroll software. They're not paying us. They're not sponsoring this podcast. It's just we really think it's a great product that you guys would like.
Absolutely.
And now let's get into politics. Let's talk. No, okay. I guess let's wrap this up. Hope you loved the interview. What else do we have to say to them, Kevin?
Please ask us some questions. Download us on the iTunes store, and we'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great weekend, and goodbye.